So, welcome to 8 things charities need to know about the 2024 charitable tax deadline extension, and of course, some tips on fundraising in 2025. This is a little bit of a hybrid session where we'll do some tips plus some Q&A with Nicole. That's why it's not the typical 10 things in the slides. We'll start off with our land acknowledgement, as we always do. We acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are here on today. While we meet on Zoom, we acknowledge the importance of the lands that we all call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. And if you're unfamiliar, we are the Good Growth Company. We're an upscaling company for nonprofit organizations and purpose-driven businesses who are looking to invest in their people and help scale their mission. Through Good Growth, of course, you can help boost your social impact and level up your team with our training and consulting. We are also proud to partner for this series with the Center for Social Innovation, which is Canada's largest social innovation community. And we'll talk more about them at the end as well. And with that, I would love to bring back Nicole. Nicole has given a previous session as part of our 10 Things series, and she's back today, Senior Manager of Strategic Communications and Brand at CanadaHelps, to talk to us about some of the latest things. So, Nicole, I'll turn it over to you for an intro, and then we'll get to the Q&A right after your tips. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And apologies, Daniel, for throwing off your 10 tips and bringing it down to 8. But I wanted, we're focused on quality over quantity, I think. So, and I'm happy to engage in sort of a conversation afterwards. So a little bit about me. As Daniel mentioned, I've presented here before. Happy to be back, happy to be part of this community. I've been at CanadaHelps for about 10 years or so, depending on how you calculate things. I just hit my 9-year full-time mark. I lead media, brand, and communications at CanadaHelps. I've been involved in a number of different nonprofits. Giving Tuesday is my absolute favorite day of the year. I love it, maybe even more than my birthday. And I'm a hardcore Swiftie, and I am not apologetic about it. So you'll often find me listening to Taylor Swift on my spare time. Though CanadaHelps, I just wanted to take a second to talk about CanadaHelps in case anyone's not familiar. We are Canada's largest platform for donating and fundraising online. More than 4.9 million Canadians have leveraged CanadaHelps to make a donation to one of Canada's 85,000 registered charities. We have hit the $3.4 billion mark in terms of dollars raised. We raise about $500 million every year, so it goes up quite quickly. And for charities, we provide easy-to-use online fundraising technology and a whole suite of different tools for charities to be able to leverage and use. And this is our 25th anniversary this year. Back in 2000, we were founded by 3 university students who sort of had that foresight to say that there was the dot-com boom, charities were being left behind, and how can they sort of turn that around? So before we move forward, I wanted to sort of go through the fine print in terms of what is happening when it comes to this charitable tax deadline, because if you've been paying attention to the news and paying attention to sort of this saga, there's been a lot of sort of bumps and roller coaster sort of feelings when it comes to this whole news. So rewind, of course, there was the Canada Post strike. A lot of charities, unfortunately, were really hit hard when it comes to that Canada Post strike and the effects. I've spoken to a couple of charities. One charity had about 2% of their revenue relying on direct mail, while about 22% of another charity that I spoke to, their revenue is reliant on direct mail. And that organization, specifically the one that relies on it by about 22%, was really concerned and was trying to pivot as quickly as possible in order to figure out what to do, turn to digital, and raise money during the really critical holiday season. So the government of Canada heard sort of a rallying cry from the sector and many organizations to extend the charitable deadline for 2024 tax applicable tax receipts. And I'll kind of spare you all the details, but I'll fast forward to where we are right now. The CRA on January 23rd officially confirmed, given the fact that this legislation was announced, but Parliament has been prorogued, meaning it has not formally passed for any sort of policy nerds out there. A lot of charities were sort of wondering, like, it's not passed, Parliament is paused, what's going to happen? Should I even go ahead and tell my donors this? But the CRA thankfully came out and said, we acknowledge that this announcement was made. We are going to honor it to avoid any confusion or any issues. So we can go ahead and leverage and use that as, official sort of guidance. So at the end of the day, what this means is donors can choose to apply eligible receipts for 2024 or 2025 from January 1st of this year to February 28th on their 2024 income tax. This means that cash donations are eligible, or those transferred by check, credit card, money order, or electronic payment. The fine print details that securities, gifts in kind, payroll deductions, or bequests bequests from individuals who've passed away after 2024 are not included. And for any details in terms of the terms and conditions, I've linked the Canada Revenue Agency website for more details. Happy to share this deck and the URL for that. So given the fact that today is February 13th, the deadline for charities to be able to sort of push this out to supporters is on February 28th. There's still some time in order to get this message out, whether it's today or whether it's early next week, as sort of a final call for charities to let their donors know about this opportunity. So the first tip, we're going to dive right into it, and I'm going to kind of speed through this as quickly as possible to leave time for discussion at the end. But I think it's really important to first inform supporters. It goes without saying, it's almost obvious, but I will say that I haven't seen a lot of charities actually do this, I think in part because of all the confusion that took place earlier when this initial proposal was sort of put forward in terms of proposed legislation. One of the really great things is that depending on where you live or taxes owed or your financial circumstances, you can get as much as 49% back on your donation if you're giving to a registered charity and getting that tax credit and applying that tax receipt to your personal income tax. It's really important to be sharing this information with your supporters via your newsletter or social media, your website, or any other marketing channels. It can be as quick as a post on social media and trying to get the word out there. And if it really helps you, we have a CanadaHelps tax calculator on our site where you can plug in how much money you are planning to donate, and you can identify which province or territory you live in. And we then give you an estimate in terms of how much money you potentially could get back. Of course, it's an estimate, depends on sort of where your taxes fall, but it gives you a bit of an indication as to how much of a credit you can get back. So, or can be applied to your taxes, I should say. The other thing I'll highlight is that last December, we conducted an Ipsos poll and we asked Canadians if they were planning to claim charitable donations on their 2023 personal income tax. And only about 56% of Canadians actually said yes. Now, granted, it is more than half. However, I think we all should be aiming to get closer to that 100 mark so that more donors are realizing sort of the benefits, that not only are they being altruistic and giving and of course making a difference, which is sort of the number one reason why any donor makes a difference, but there's also that added perk of those tax benefits as well. So I'm going to move on to number 2. We're still good on time. I'm going to keep close watch of that. But we really want to also highlight and communicate the impact in sort of 2 different ways. So number 1, I mentioned how some of the organizations I spoke to, there was one organization that really didn't rely heavily on direct mail, while other organizations really took a hit when it comes to the revenue that they were expecting to receive through direct mail. I think if your charity has been hit by the Canada Post strike, or for that matter, any other challenge, for example, one organization that I've spoken to quite a bit, Nova Scotia SPCA, they've run some really great urgent appeal campaigns after, unfortunately, a crisis has struck for their organization. So, for example, they unfortunately were the victims of a robbery a couple years back. And they actually, instead of sort of insulating or sort of keeping that on the private end, they actually shared with their supporters that, hey, unfortunately, this happened to us, and we need your support in order to sort of recuperate the loss of that crime that took place. And they were able to raise quite a bit of money in response to that sort of crisis appeal to a degree. So be open and be transparent with your supporters. They will not be able to read your minds, and I think that's really important in a number of different facets. The other thing is, of course, share your vision of impact. I think a lot of charities sometimes need that additional reinforcement, perhaps, that we need to sort of be communicating what our ideal world is and what all of our organizations are trying to accomplish. And I say this rooted in fact here. So back in 2024, we published our giving report. It's an annual cornerstone report for the sector. And one of the really key findings was highlighted around specifically environment charities. The report itself was highlighting, it really was taking a close lens on environment charities as a cause. And the reason why we did that was because environment organizations are really interconnected with a number of other causes, whether it's housing or food insecurity, for example, immigration or migration for climate change purposes, humanitarian disasters, so on and so forth. So we wanted to sort of have a closer lens on environment causes. And we asked Canadians who previously said that they previously made a donation to environment charities and they stopped. We asked them why they stopped. And 20% of those Canadians who had previously made a donation to an environment charity and stopped said that they didn't feel like their gift was being effective, that they doubted the effectiveness of their gift. And I think that that is an indication that it is important to consistently and frequently and continuously reiterate messages that you may feel like you're constantly repeating in terms of impact. But in this 24/7 news cycle and constant sort of stream of information that we're all fed, particularly through our phones, even though it's repeated for you, it may be new for someone else, or perhaps a supporter that may have heard this in the past. They may have already forgotten about sort of how important your organization is in terms of impact. So it's really important to consistently communicate that impact, whether it's good news or bad news. I'll move on to number 3, and, again, although it's on February 13th today, and you only have about until February 28th to really get this message out to your donors, but it's not too late. You could pull a list of your donors that potentially gave to you in November and December 2023, but they didn't give to you in 2024. And the idea, of course, is, did some donors hold back making a gift, whether it was a check or cash that they would have popped into the mail? Could you go back and try to, let them know about this extra opportunity? Or on the flip side, perhaps the donor forgot about, making that extra gift to you at the end of the year. They would have donated online. They wouldn't have even considered writing a check or popping cash into the mail. And they may be really inclined to make a donation before February 28th if they're going to get that added tax benefit. So I think it's completely reasonable and possible to develop a really quick "We Missed You" campaign. In fact, I don't know, there's Valentine's Day tomorrow, so you can kind of tie it into that thread of sort of, you love your supporters, we missed you, like, come back to us, and try to see if that sentiment really resonates and has those results. And of course, you want to inform your supporters of that extended tax deadline to try to drive donations with that campaign. So, once you've pulled your list in terms of comparing your 2023, or even you're going back as far as your 2022 campaign, it's important to develop your email cadence pretty much from now until February 28th. And you can develop this over a couple of days, and also you can make sure that there are a series of emails taking place in the last week of February, starting perhaps on the Monday all the way through until February 28th, so that you can really share this urgent campaign. You want to potentially consider setting a really realistic yet ambitious fundraising goal. I don't think it's realistic to say that you want to raise, maybe $20 million in a single week when that is not potentially possible for your organization. But if you could really see a lot of success raising $5,000 in a week or even $1,000 in a week, set that goal where it kind of keeps you up at night, but also it gets you excited. It gets you excited. It gets your supporters excited. It gets all of your supporters rallying behind a similar cause that they can be part of this joint goal. I'll share an example in a moment on the next slide, but you want to use a fundraising thermometer if you can. I like using Sendric. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's SENDTRIC, I believe. And it's a platform that's pretty reasonable to use, that you embed the HTML code into your emails, and it's a pretty good tool to sort of drive that sense of urgency. You also want to drive that sense of urgency with your email subject lines, for example, and state there's hours left or days left to give, that this is your last chance to give. Really open up your inbox and look at any sort of retailer that you're potentially signed up on their email list for, and see the tips and tricks that they use, and consider how you can apply them to your nonprofit. The other thing I'll highlight is that there's a lot of hesitation that I hear from charities when I'm suggesting to them that they need to be sending out several emails with different content, but sharing messages in the same message, but in different ways. And there's the hesitation, oh gosh, Nicole, what happens if my unsubscribe rank skyrockets? Or what happens if people are hitting the spam button? Or what happens if people hate hearing from me and never want to hear from me again? Those are all completely valid concerns, but here's the thing. When you are sending out your email campaigns, you need to be monitoring your open rates. You need to be monitoring your click-through rates and your revenue performance, of course, as well. But you need to make sure that the content is really valuable, it is enticing, and it is trying to drive that person to convert and make that donation. If you are going to send me the same email 5 times and not change a single thing, that is not what I'm suggesting, nor will that work for your supporters. But if you, for example, re-forward an email that you've already sent to me, you add a section up at the top, you say, hey, Nicole, we've hit this mark in our campaign and we are just $1,000 shy of hitting our goal. Will you help us? That will drive me to really consider making a donation. And I don't think I can just speak for me on my behalf in this sense. I think that sort of speaks to sort of just general behavior overall. The last thing, don't forget a clear call to action. I was speaking to a colleague of mine, and he was sort of remarking how many charity emails he's on, or nonprofit emails, that do not include a clear call to action. And it is such a miss, and it's not to be forgotten. Ask yourself, how many times do I include a donate link in my emails? Ask yourself, how clear is your call to action button? How many messages or opportunities you're asking people to sort of engage with, whether it's going to your blog or making a donation. If you have 100 different asks in an email, that is very overwhelming, and you're not going to get any sort of action among your subscribers. Alrighty, so just a really quick example. This was an email I received from Doctors Without Borders, and a couple things I'll highlight here. Of course, they use that countdown timer. This is a static image, so you're sort of missing, because when you open the email, it counts down actively. Of course, that it's a static image. I wasn't able to capture that. They've made their gift goal really clear in the fact that they have a matching gift of $130,000, which is amazing. They've made it really clear to me when the deadline is. They've used red sort of colors and sort of more urgent messaging to really try to drive that sense of urgency, and sort of that there's only a little bit of time left. So sort of keep all those things in mind. And I think even Daniel, we could do another email, best practice marketing sort of webinar, or potentially others can speak to that as well.
Yep.
Um,
I just want to mention we did one we actually did one just this week on Monday as well. So
okay,
those interested, feel free to reach out and we can send you the link to that.
perfect. I think I saw that as well actually pop up on my Instagram, so that's excellent. And I'm sure that there's a million more tips and tricks when it comes to email marketing. This is really just scratching the surface. The other thing I'll highlight, and I'm gonna move a little bit quicker here to make sure that we have enough time for discussion, is making sure that you have contact information and sort of redundant contact information. And one of the things I've sort of heard from a number of different nonprofits was that, if you flash backwards to COVID, for example, and when all of us were at home constantly and events for fundraisers were canceled, a lot of charities were sort of scrambling to figure out ways to reach their supporters and donors when they were all at home. Now, again, flash backwards to the Canada Post strike, a lot of charities only had addresses and names for their supporters and sometimes didn't have emails, believe it or not, depending on the organization. So I think that this is an opportunity to sort of learn from these, challenges that have come up and think to yourself, do I have emails, phone numbers, addresses for all of my supporters? And if not, how do I collect that really valuable information? People change their address, don't change it, don't set up a forwarding address. People change their emails. You want those redundancies set up so that you don't lose contact with your really important supporters. So, one of the ways that you can do this is to plan a personalized survey to collect this information from your supporters. I'll share an example in just a moment. And you can use this survey to collect donation preferences, reasons as to why they gave, why they want to support your cause. And you can even consider making it really fun and considering offering a prize for completion. And I'll share an example here. So this is Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto. I'm on their mailing list, and when they conducted a survey, they invited me here. Obviously, you can see a very clear call to action. I can't miss that button right here. And they wanted me to fill out their survey so that I could tell them what I wanted to hear from them about in terms of communication, preferences, or stories or information that I was interested in hearing from them. I believe the survey also asked me why I wanted to give, why I wanted to support. But also this survey is an opportunity for them to ask me, hey, Nicole, what's your phone number? Hey, Nicole, what's your email? What's your home address, so that they can add that to their CRM and make sure that they stay in contact with me. One thing I'll just highlight here, you obviously don't want to clutter and make your conversion, when you're setting up your donation forms on your site, to be really clunky and cluttered. You don't want to add extra steps for the sake of adding extra steps, because anything that would slow down a donation is not what you want to do. But I highlight the fact that on our CanadaHelps customizable donation forms, you can collect phone numbers. It could be a really effective tool to get those phone numbers, so you can try texting your supporters by using sort of texting software, or picking up the phone and calling them to thank them for their donation. So, you can always add that to your donation form, see how many people are filling it out, make sure you're adding that to your system, and, test as you go along. Speaking of phoning, calling a friend, the other opportunity is potentially asking your staff, your board members, your volunteers, your advisory committee, and leveraging their support to do a really quick and dirty call campaign over the next week to call up your supporters, the ones that you have phone numbers for, and ask them, if they didn't make a donation in 2024, let them know about this extended charitable tax deadline, and give them that extra opportunity to say, this is your chance to be able to make that extra donation and have it apply to your 2024 income tax. Or alternatively, if you've never done a thank you campaign when you're calling your supporters, pick up the phone, call your supporters, have those one-on-one interactions, And even though it feels like, who calls people these days? I don't know about all of you, but it's actually one of my favorite ways of sort of chatting with friends or communicating in that sense. But you can get some really good insights from your supporters in terms of maybe why they started supporting you, why they care, other ways that they want to support you, but maybe they've just never spoken to someone on your team before, and they can use this as an opportunity to learn more about ways that they can add that extra support. So make that sort of consideration in terms of how that works for your team. And also just call up your supporters who actually also gave to you during your 2024 campaign, because you can make them aware of that extended deadline. And who knows, maybe they had a really good sort of year and financial year, and they may want to make that extra gift. This one, I think if you take away any of the tips here, I think this is the most important one, not to sort of call one out over the other. But I think that with COVID and, when events were canceled and charities and nonprofits had to scramble in order to make up for that lost revenue, the Canada Post strike also really highlighted to a lot of charities that rely on direct mail that them locking themselves into different sort of revenue streams and not having a diversified revenue portfolio is a risk for any organization, right? For anyone who is into financial planning, for example, it's really important to diversify your investment portfolio for reasons that when things happen, you have things to sort of fall back on. So I think that this is a really opportune time. Perhaps you don't need to do this before the February 28th charitable tax deadline. You can do that right after. But assessing your fundraising pie and understanding where are you getting your funds, and asking yourself really hard questions like, if you lost this particular grant or this funding, or if Canada Post goes on strike again in May, which is not off the table. We certainly hope that does not happen, but they are needing to negotiate again starting this May. What would you do, and what would your organization do, and what could you potentially fall back on? I have numbers here on the slide when it comes to sort of tax filer data over the years, and just overall, we've seen fewer Canadians giving to organizations, and that is a challenge for all organizations, nonprofits, and charities. But one of the things I want to highlight how important it is monthly giving revenue. I actually I saw an article in the Globe and Mail. Transparently, I did not read the full thing. I saw the headline, but the headline gave me enough information. I do need to get back to reading it though. But it was sent my way, and it was talking about the fact that the RRSP rush for personal taxes actually has declined a bit because people are contributing on a more consistent basis to their RRSP throughout the year. And to a degree, that's a really good news story. People are sort of being proactive. And the reason why I bring this up is because in a similar vein, monthly giving has continuously increased on CanadaHelps. Last year, we saw a 6% increase. We've continued to see increases. It's a really popular method of giving among younger Canadians, and it's a really important opportunity for you to share to your supporters what the benefits are for them in order to be able to plan and stay in control of their budget. But also, it is so important for any organization. I don't need to tell anyone from the nonprofit sector here how important that reliable funding is for any organization. Really quickly, examples here. This is Ellie's Place. They are a charity, and they have a really great ways to give page. I actually think, Daniel, transparently, I've used this example on this webinar before, but it's a really good one I wanted to highlight again. They have that really like that shaded color for monthly donors to try to draw your eye into it. And when you do click on that monthly opportunity, they have a donation form that is dedicated to monthly donors only. So it draws you in to make that monthly donation right away. And this, I'm sort of cheating here for slide 8 or for tip 8, but tip 8 is really straightforward. It's just a start. All of these tips potentially are a little bit overwhelming, perhaps. We all are wearing 500 different hats in our organizations. And I think if you take anything, try one of these tips and try to apply it, especially before that extended February 28th tax deadline if you are a registered charity. And just begin, test, try, fail, learn, and have fun along the way. But happy to chat, answer questions, and I
Awesome.
think I'll stop sharing. Danielle, is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, you can stop sharing. Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicole, for that. It was awesome. And yeah, no problem. We need examples, and it's totally fine to repurpose those. I think it's really great to see the visuals as well. Um, First question I wanted, so we have a few questions that were submitted by our community, so I'll jump in on those now. Thanks for kind of saving time for that. The first question was a little bit, just a quick technical one, which is, are most organizations asking donors to cover processing fees for online credit card gifts still? And then how does that work with Canada Helps?
Mhm. I don't have any sort of data in terms of how many organizations are doing that. I actually just made a donation to a charity yesterday and it was an option on the site. I know a lot of organizations are testing it and trying it. We do have cover the fees available at Canada Helps, and you are able to toggle that on or off. And happy to give you some more information about that offline. But sometimes it's a matter of turning it on and seeing how your supporters react and seeing if they actually do that, if you get any feedback. But it is certainly it's becoming more popular.
Makes sense. We got a quick question in the chat, because of the deadline that was extended. When should charities issue their tax receipts? More of a technical question.
Mhm. Well, I can tell you I'm not a member of the CRA, but I can tell you couple things, and the rest I will have to sort of indicate to you to go to the CRA for any additional details. But tax receipting is not really, you need to continue on with the tax receipting tools, or the rules, I should say, that the CRA provides. At Canada Helps, for example, we issue the tax receipt instantly. So if you make a $20 donation to an organization today, you'll get the tax receipt and be able to apply it. But for any charities that are manually creating tax receipts, you could allow donors to come to you if they make a donation before that February 28th deadline. And if they say, hey, I'd like to use this against my 2024 income tax, you would then, out of courtesy, need to issue that tax receipt. But it's pretty much business as usual for the most part. So the only thing is, if a donor makes a donation that is eligible for that tax benefit, again, going back to sort of the fine print that I put at the beginning of the slideshow, the donor may ask you if you manually develop those tax receipts. I'm hoping that is clear.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was a question live from the chat, so feel free to follow up. What can you share about giving trends for fundraising this year in 2025, particularly for perhaps a non-charitable organization? So I'm not sure if you're seeing different trends for charity, ones with charity status and ones without, but what are some of the giving trends for fundraising this year?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke about monthly giving and how that continues to grow, and that, of course, is applicable for both charities or nonprofits. So I think organizations should really lean into that more and more. I'll acknowledge sort of the nonprofit part in just a moment. The one thing else I will call out for registered charities is donations of securities. So for registered charities, people can make a donation of donors can make a donation of register of securities, that is, and get the reduce some of their capital gains tax, and also get a tax receipt. That is a really popular method that is continuously growing. Again, I mentioned this at the top, securities is not eligible for this February 28th, 2024 extended deadline for the 2024 taxes. For February 28th, 2025. Sorry, I'm speaking too fast here. I feel like I'm getting tongue-tied. But we saw it grow almost 40% last year, securities. So if you are a registered charity, it's really easy to set up a donation form through your Canada Helps account on your website. You don't need a broker. You don't need anything extra. You don't also need to be going out to sort of donors who potentially have securities donations. Put it on your site, put it on sort of your ways to give page, and see if anyone comes to your site. It takes you 2 seconds to create that account, that form in your Canada Helps account. But going back to nonprofits in general, um, I think again, monthly donations, I think I would just reiterate that as sort of the one of the really continuously growing ways that we're really seeing popularize over the years. And there's also a lot of other creative ways of giving online. I've seen, um, you know, organizations do. I saw one organization that was quite a large organization. They are granted a registered charity. They were developing, from what I could see, because they posted a job description, a strategy around gamification of fundraising. And it was someone specifically focused on streaming and fundraising. So, gamers who stream and they want to raise funds for an organization along the way. I'm personally not really in that world, so I can't really speak to it too much, but I know that's another way that is growing quite a bit too.
Makes sense. Thank you for sharing. Okay, when it comes to, you spoke to us a little bit about this in your presentation, when it comes to motivating people to donate to get it on their return now, so in the next, 10, 15 days, the next 2 weeks, let's say, is there any like immediate things you can emphasize to get people or encourage people to take advantage of that?
Yeah. I think it goes back to the urgency of the deadline. And I think that it may sound so simple that I'm making that suggestion, but I think if you really think about the ways in which you act, it's often by a deadline. I'm going to assume, I'm going to go off on a limb and say that if I give you a deadline and I say, Daniel, it's next week instead of
Mhm.
6 months from now, you're probably going to act quicker. And I think a deadline puts fire under people. So, I'm not making any sort of wild suggestions here. You do have this February 28th tax deadline if you are a registered charity that you can really leverage. But I would really emphasize it. And that's why I was saying in your emails to call it out in your subject lines, call it out consistently throughout your message, drive that urgency. So, for example, I don't know, I don't have my calendar in front of me, but on February 24th, for example, which is a Monday, send out an email to say, hey, you have 5 days left to make a donation that is eligible, that you can apply to your 2024 taxes. Include some information about it. Then maybe on the Wednesday, you may want to send that email again to anybody who didn't open your email on Monday. Change the subject line. You don't have to change the body of the email, but see if that changing of subject line could adjust the open rate, for example.
Yeah.
You then may want on Thursday to say, hey, you have less than 24 hours left. And then again, you get the picture. On Friday, you may want to say you have hours left, right? So just driving that urgency.
Makes sense. Yeah, there's all different ways to drive urgency, and the reality is that people are busy, and like you said, Nicole, they may have seen the email come through, or maybe they missed it altogether. But for sure, if you can tell that they haven't opened it, it doesn't hurt to send that additional reminder because of the urgency. You don't want to be bombarding people to resending a generic email newsletter, but for sure, a call to action. We need reminders, absolutely. Okay, another question that we have submitted is, what are the biggest challenges that you see that charities are facing right now in general? I know you talked a little bit about or sorry, you quoted the 2024 Giving Report, which is a super valuable resource I would recommend anyone check out. But are there any challenges that you think or that you see charities facing right now in general?
Yeah, there's many. I'm taking a deep breath before I answer that question because I
Yeah.
think that it's on the one hand, I highlighted in the presentation that over many, many years for registered charities specifically, there's a number of or there's a decline of the number of Canadians who are making donations to charities. Now, granted, we are relying on CRA data when it comes to that, and that is reliant on the number of Canadians who are taking their tax receipts and claiming their tax receipts. And again, we know that not all Canadians do that, but it's the best and also most sort of year after year way we can sort of track these trends. So that is definitely a challenge, that fewer Canadians are making donations. I think that I've actually been speaking a lot about uncertainty for the last month, and that's probably not a surprise to anybody here. There's a lot of uncertainty out in the world, and it's quite stressful. There's uncertainty regarding, if the US-Canada trade war, really takes place, and really we really see the effects of that, what that means for the economy, what that means for charitable giving, or even just the demand that is potentially facing nonprofits. So that uncertainty is really stressful, I think, for nonprofits right now. And I think that we all need to sort of figure out ways to develop communities like this. And I'm grateful, Daniel, that you bring organizations together in order to learn from one another. But I think those are two really big things right now to call out. You could probably do a whole other webinar on other challenges.
Absolutely, yeah. Like you mentioned, there's all kinds. There's economic uncertainty. There's digital transformation. There's issues with challenges with talent,
Yeah.
securing talent, capacity issues, of course. So we will definitely, but definitely appreciate you sharing those two key ones from your perspective. In terms of changes in fundraising, someone is asking, are there any new ways to fundraise? This, I guess, goes back to maybe giving trends that are coming up, but yeah, what are some newer, more innovative ways you've seen when it comes to fundraising?
I think that, I mean, we've seen, I'll share that we've seen some platforms leverage cryptocurrency, for example, for donations as one example of sort of a new way of giving. We've also seen at CanadaHelps, for example, we launched what we call our cause funds. And these are funds, you could almost think of them as mutual funds, but for Canadians who want to give to a cause, but they may not know where they want to actually make their donation. So we have 4 cause funds up on our site on CanadaHelps. And when you make a donation to any of those funds, your donations then divided among registered charities that are all supporting that one cause. So it's a new sort of way of making that donation. I think in the US, there's donor advised funds that are much more popular than in Canada so far. So there's those opportunities. And then also there's, in non-monetary ways, mutual aid networks that continuously grow that are not part of sort of the traditional system, so to speak, of giving in terms of registered charities and nonprofits. It's those day-to-day interactions of how do I help my neighbor? How do I help someone in my community? I know that's certainly growing quite a bit. And also, actually, Daniel, I'll add one more. Giving circles is another one that I've seen grow. I haven't, there's some versions of it in Canada. So for example, there's, 100 women who care, for example, or sometimes there's organizations like 100 people who care or 100 men who care that come together. It's an opportunity to bring community together, and then you all discuss a cause that matters to you, and then at the end of the night everyone makes a donation to that one cause, and together you make a really big impact. And there's Philanthropy Together, in case there's of interest. They're a US based organization, and they support organizations to develop their own giving circles. But anyways, there's
Okay.
lots of suggestions.
Lots of innovative ways for sure. I know we're coming up on time because you got to run soon. There's a couple more questions. One of them specifically from a nonprofit who asks, as a nonprofit rather than a registered charity, what alternative strategies or online fundraising tools can we use to attract and retain donors? We do have a lot of not-for-profits and other types of organizations and
Yep.
grassroots groups.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would still look at and leverage ways that charities are making funds and apply it to your organization. There's nothing holding you back from it, minus the tax benefits, right? So I think for that reason, take a look at the new and innovative ways of streaming services, or monthly donations or fundraisers, and take that and apply. For me, in my work at CanadaHelps, a lot of the work I do is I actually look at the for-profit sector and see how does the company sell me my shoes, for example, and what are the tactics that they use for best e-commerce practices, and how do we apply? It's obviously a bit of a different situation, but I think looking outside of strictly the nonprofit sector for those examples, you can glean a lot of really good ideas.
Certainly cross sector or pollination from other industries, I think has a big impact when it comes to innovating. Last question that we have submitted that I'll bring up for time is what are some effective ways to leverage platforms to meet or exceed small fundraising targets, especially when you're building a donor base from scratch? For example, this particular nonprofit says their year-end fundraising campaign had a modest $5,000 target. So, would you approach it? Would you approach it differently? Are there any other things that you would recommend for kind of these smaller goals with a smaller donor base?
Yeah, I love that question because I think there are 100% ways that you can tackle that. And I hope you reached your goal, by the way, for the individual who asked.
Yeah,
Um, I've seen that. I've actually seen Daniel, to also add to your comment about sort of looking outside of the nonprofit sector. I've actually seen a lot of political emails, like campaigns, have some really interesting email campaign techniques, and you probably wouldn't be able to believe the number of emails that I subscribe to because I like to see what other people send me. One tactic I've seen is they will send me an email and they will say, we're just asking you for $3. That is it. And I mean, at the end of the day, what can $3 can really contribute to an organization, right? Like it's such a little amount of money. But then as part of their message, they add, and rightfully so, they add that if I give $3 and Daniel gives $3 and April gives $3 and Lindsay gives $3 and everybody on this call gives $3. I'm a words person and can't do math this quickly in my head, but someone can do the math, and
yeah,
it makes this bigger amount. So asking for really small donations and kind of bringing them upwards, or getting them to a higher level, is certainly a tactic. Or just really quickly, the other thing that I've seen is they'll say, hey Nicole, we need 10 people from Mississauga. I live in Mississauga, to give $20 today, and that will help us reach our goal. And for me, when I get that message, I think to myself, okay, $20, they're clearly asking for my community. They need 20 people to sign up, or however many I just said. Yeah, sure, I'll raise my hand, right? So it's really interesting that they're really trying to target very specific numbers and goals and that sort of stuff. But
yeah.
anyways, there's lots of good examples.
That's great. And yeah, this particular organization, they're called Anissa. They focus on empowering women through things like career support. They have a career accelerator, leadership programs, all these different things. And it sounds like for their goal, getting, for example, a career accelerator program, getting 5 companies to each pitch in $1,000, or 10 companies to each sponsor it for $500, things like that. That you can position it as Nicole mentioned, tangible numbers, and say, hey, we want to support 30 women in this program. We need to cover the cost. It's X amount, $50 per participant. How many people are you able to cover for us? Making it tangible. I think that really helps with those goals, whether they're big or small. Um, Thank you so much, Nicole. I know we got a wrap today. For anyone interested, of course, they can connect with you and follow you, and of course, check out the resources that CanadaHelps has. We will be sharing a summary of today's session and some of those takeaways. Thank you again for your time, Nicole, and thank you to everyone who tuned in live. Hopefully, you've been able to get some value from this session. Tune in, not next week because we're celebrating Family Day, but the following Monday we'll be back, and we've got sessions every Monday in March. So we'll see you then. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.